Hey there. It's another episode of Beyond Analytics, and we have a wonderful guest today, Sam. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself before we talk about the theme of the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm Sam Balderas. My career didn't start with a love for dashboards. It actually started with a question. So I was asking, like, why are people the closest to the patient or the person that or the people that are actually responsible for outcomes, the ones that have least access to data? And that realization really sort of shaped my career and changed the trajectory. So today, my focus is on helping organizations transform analytics from something they can deliver into something people actually use. Because when data reaches our frontline teams in a clear and actionable way, that's when it truly, truly drives impact.
That's such an impactful introduction, right? I mean, you start by saying that your career did not start by dashboards, but by asking a question. Before we go on to the episode, right, an interesting stat that I was going through a couple of weeks back is 80% of the dashboards are never used at all, right? And then that's exactly what we will be talking about today, and what your introduction also highlighted is whether you want to just give something that stays there forever without being used, or whether you want to drive impact. And that's what we'll be talking about today, right? It's a topic that we have touched in bits and pieces in the past episode, but we never got on to kind of talk about it as a whole full episode. So let's talk about it: data enablement versus data delivery. You've always said that, and then this is no secret that most organizations or all organizations have abundance of data, right? And yet many struggle to generate impact from it. Do you want to start off by talking a bit about that?
Absolutely. So organizations, they don't struggle because they lack data. They struggle because the data isn't reaching the people who make decisions every day. It gets concentrated at the executive level or buried in dashboards that are interpreted differently across teams. And so as companies scale, you can really start to see the metrics drift. Finance defines success one way, operations defines it another way, and frontline teams often don't even see the data at all. So the problem isn't access to dashboards. It's more so around the alignment and the meaning and ensuring the insights reach the operational layer where decisions actually happen.
You interestingly talk about, and I didn't want to get into the silo bit, but then you did talk about departments. You talk about finance. You talk about ops, right? And as a leader in the analytics space, you've been leading a lot of teams, right? From data engineers, data scientists. Uh, what would be your one liner message? Maybe I'm trying to overgeneralize it, but if, say, for example, a new data engineer or data scientist joins your team, what would be your key message to that person to make an impact?
Yes, so I've had the privilege of working with different levels of data professionals, and I would say really it's my one liner would be alignment versus data quality. So I've worked with organizations that have had excellent data infrastructure, clean pipelines, modern tools, and they really do like still struggle to improve performance because again the issue wasn't the data itself; it was that the teams didn't agree on what success meant, who own the metrics, or what action should even follow. So the data quality enables insight, but the alignment itself is what enables the action. So without that shared accountability and clarity, even like the perfect data story stays informational. It doesn't even become operational.
As we move on to much more of the collaboration bits here, right? You've always believed that collaborations or workshops often outperform maybe say dashboards, right? And that's from an impact perspective. Why do you feel that?
Yeah, so dashboards, they really deliver information, but the workshops themselves actually are what create the ownership. So when teams participate in defining the metrics, what they mean, why they matter, and how they can connect that to their work, again, regardless of what role you're sitting in, whether you're on the technical side, operations side, finance side, the data stops feeling external and it really starts to feel operational. And that shift in those workshops is critical because people don't act on the dashboards. They don't They don't act on dashboards that they don't trust or that they don't understand. They act on metrics that they help to define, that they have an ownership in. And so these workshops can turn analytics into something that teams consume, into something that they actually use.
To talk about metrics or KPIs, right? In your opinion, what role do shared definitions, right, play in, say, true democratization?
Yeah, so I would say that data democratization is often just misunderstood as a tooling problem, and it's giving everyone access to dashboard. But true visibility is about shared interpretation. So if 10 people are seeing the same number and define it in 10 different ways, access hasn't created clarity, it's only created confusion. And now you're having to defend that. So shared definitions, clear ownership, and a common language is actually what allows us to move that data across teams. So, again, just from the leadership to the frontline team without it actually losing its meaning. And this is, from my perspective and where I sit, this is actually what makes analytics scalable.
That's interesting, right? And whenever we talk about data democratization, right, we always touch upon a couple of aspects. And again, right, you did speak about it's not a tooling problem. It's not something that you just give and forget. In your opinion, how do you look at data democratization when the consumer is, say, a tech consumer versus a consumer who's, say, like a frontline employee of a healthcare organization?
Yeah, so data creates like its most valuable or its most value when it's reaches the people that are closest to the customer, or in my case, to the patient. In retail, this means that the store teams have simple, actionable signals that they can use in real time, not retrospective reports that they can't influence. And then in pharma, it means that case managers and patient support teams have visibility into where patients are getting stuck so that they can intervene faster. And again, this isn't necessarily, only the ownership of the frontline teams. This actually goes across the field access managers on the manufacturer side, as well as the leadership team on that side, or the PSS ops leaders as well. So if data is only informing leadership, it improves reporting. If it reaches the frontline teams, it actually improves the outcomes. And that's the difference, really, really, that's the difference between visibility and impact.
You talk about impact, and something of a detour I always feel, and it changes industry by industry, right? You talk about retail, the impact might be, say, the bottom line revenue, right? Or the bottom line CAC or LTV. From a healthcare perspective, right? I'm curious to know, how do you measure impact as such, right? But because it's much more emotional than anything else.
So how do we measure impact? I would say behavior is the true metric. And it's ultimately the purpose of analytics is monitoring and measuring the behavior of change. If the dashboard doesn't change what someone does tomorrow, whether in the retail side, whether that's a store associate or nurse or a manager, then the work isn't complete. So whenever we use metrics like dashboard views, those can sometimes be misleading. And someone opening a report, it doesn't mean that anything's changed. The real signal is a shift in operational success. The decisions are faster, you have better interventions, you have improved outcome, and behavior is ultimately the metric that matters. And what's really ironic about that is that behavior isn't always something that you have to measure on paper. It's something that can be seen and can be felt at a cultural level as well.
Since we are talking about behavior, impact, and data, we can't leave AI out of the equation, right? Especially given the fact that it has advanced to a point where it's no longer a POC or no longer a what if. It's here. In your opinion, do you feel that AI has made it more accessible and more impactful than anything else. This is much more from a consumer perspective and not more from a development or a process perspective, but more from a consumer perspective.
So I actually believe that the role in AI is helping people to have better access and to be able to connect the dots outside of their day to day. So while a specific frontline may be very interested in an outbound call, or they may be highly invested on a follow-up, they don't necessarily get to see the entire journey and understand what the impact is. And so but when they have access to these AI tools, they can certainly start to better understand the why. And I think that there's also really good, I've seen some really, really amazing leaders who are really good at helping them to connect those dots and helping them to understand the why, and making those connections back to the original processes. And so I certainly think that AI is working in its absolute, its absolute value. It's more accessible to everyone, but I don't think that those AI shifts have necessarily happened in the industry at the frontline level. Like, do they have access to, be able to write better emails? Yes, of course. But are they actually using AI, embedded or integrated, in the workflow to help drive better decisions? I think we're still not there yet.
That's interesting, right? And you start by talking about the why. And I really feel that it's not specifically for the healthcare space, but across the industry where the why has literally been one of the foundational elements where AI has been able to kind of give the why to that consumer so that the consumer of the analytics or dashboard or the number can then take a much more informed decision, right? So before we wrap it up, right, I just wanted to get a sense from you as to what do you think is the biggest misconception leaders have about data democratization?
Yeah, so I really do believe the biggest misconception is that access means, giving everyone access to all the tools. But access without the context creates noise and not clarity. So, truly, if you give people the insights that they understand, that they trust, and that they can act on in the context of the role, it's not just about exposing all the data. It's about delivering the right data to the right person at the right moment in a usable form. And to me, that's what makes analytics a part of how organizations operate and not just how they report. Not
That's good, good. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, not that I want to land on this, but I think this is where, as data analyst and a data professional, regardless of where you sit, in the IT organization, data professionals, they really can help to, act as, consultative partners by really understanding the business. I think once you understand how to operate as an analyst or as a data scientist, you really have to understand the operations at its core. And again, if you're simply doing reporting, you miss the mark.
That is true, and I've always said that actually, right? Data teams often struggle because of the fact that they purely are in that mindset of reporting. There are rare chances where you see a team where they first discuss the why or workshop the why. Like why is in like not why is in the number, but why are you creating that piece of dashboard or why are you creating that piece of analytics? What's the end goal? And then work backwards, as opposed to okay, this is the data set that I have, and let's create these 20, 30, 40, even 100 KPIs for that matter, and then present it to the consumer or the customer and then take it from there. So I always feel working backwards, thinking from a consumer perspective always helps teams become like great data teams.
Absolutely. That's when it drives true impact. So I love that.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Sam. It was a pleasure talking to you today. It was an interesting episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Talk soon.